want answers.
I want the truth. The truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Welcome to The Truth Hurts. This is your host, Sule Prince. Sule Prince.
Johnny, that really hurts.
Whether you like it or not, sometimes the truth hurts. The truth hurts. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Will set you free.
Welcome to another great episode of the Truth Hurts podcast. If this is the first time that you are listening or watching it, please make sure to visit our resourceful website at thetruthhurtspodcast.org. That is at thetruthhurtspodcast.org. We have a lot of informative videos, audios, and contents for you. Also, please subscribe to our podcast and our YouTube channel. Your support is always appreciated. So let's get this started. Today, I have with me Samuel Sey. Samuel, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, before we get into the information, what I brought you on the show for, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Samuel Sey, as you mentioned. I work for a pro-life group called the Canadian Center for Bioethical Reform. I am the community liaison at CCBR for short. And I blog as well too at slowtowrite.com. And
what's that? Slowtowrite.com?
Slowtowrite.com, as in slow and then just writing to write.com. And that's really it. Yeah.
But you have a journalistic aspiration. Is that correct?
Yeah. I love journalism. I love to just kind of look at what's happening with politics or what's happening in cultural events and attempt to just share my side of how I understand it. Mm-hmm. But to be honest too, I'm also very happy where I'm at. I'm happy working at CCBR. It's really a dream come true. I think the reason why I loved journalism, or why I still love it, is the idea of just talking about issues that I really care about and trying to make it simple and bringing maybe perhaps complex issues and making it more simple for the average person. I really I have a passion for that. And at CCBR, I get to do that with the abortion issue, a very serious issue, of course, in our society today. And having the opportunity, the privilege and the pleasure to be able to explain what abortion really is, how abortion hurts women and kills babies to people. Because that issue is very complex to some people, and to make it more simplified for them is something that I really, really have come to really appreciate and very passionate about. So I'm happy where I'm at.
Okay. So did you do any schooling concerning journalism? Were you?
No,
You're just a natural writer.
Yeah, by the grace of God, I went to school for history.
Okay.
And liberal arts, and critical thinking and writing. I took some courses on writing and things like that. But particularly, I was just really helped by some writers that I know in my life who really have really kind of helped me out big time and kind of took me under their wing to teach me what effective writing is. Okay. And I also bought several books, I don't know, maybe 10 books on writing, different kinds of writing, so I could really study how to bring about, how to, again, just simplify things for certain people and learn different kinds of writing and everything else. So I don't have any formal training in writing, I suppose, but I just study from people and books, and that's where I am now.
Okay, well, you wrote an article which I find very interesting. Depending on who's reading it, is very controversial as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You have an article called "Our Fathers, Our Failures." What is the article about, and what prompted you to write this article?
Yeah. So the article is so I wrote it on Father's Day.
Okay.
So it's about our fathers, but as in by our fathers, I meant Black people's fathers, but also non-Black people's fathers too. And the second, I mentioned our fathers, our failures. It's meant to suggest that a lot of fathers, including my father and a lot of Black people's fathers, have been failures, but also as a sorry, as a consequence of that, it's also produced a lot of failures in my life and in the lives of many people who grow up without fathers. So by failures, I meant that unfortunately, there's a lot of failure between fathers who are absent and their sons and daughters. And I wrote it because in our world today, and especially in evangelical circles, there are a lot of conversations happening about why there's so many disparities between Black Americans and white Americans.
Yes.
And that conversation, and I'm a Canadian, I'm a Black Canadian, and I'm writing about the issue as well too. But I think what disappoints me is there are many people who are talking around the issue, but they're not really, in my opinion, dealing with the crux of the entire, issue. And people are saying that the reason why we have the disparities between white Americans and Black Americans is because of racism, particularly referring to slavery and Jim Crow. And I think we'd all agree that slavery and Jim Crow clearly had an impact on society and the culture. However, I think there are some facts that people are either ignoring or unaware of, and that's why I bring in a comparison between America and Canada, and also in a very minor way, Britain as well, where I explain that if we are suggesting that the reason why there exists disparities, racial disparities between Black Americans and white Americans in the States, how do we explain the fact that the disparities are also either exactly the same or even in some cases worse than they are in Canada, where Black Canadians and white Canadians have the same kind of issues that their American counterparts have. And Canada, we didn't have anywhere near the kind of massive systemic racism that Black Americans suffered under. So why is it then that Black Canadians are dealing with the same disparities and the same challenges that their American counterparts are having, including also Black burdens, and even, I didn't mention in the article, but all around Europe. So Black French people have the same kind of issues too. Black Australians have the same issues too. It's worldwide, sadly, and I think it is not. I think the idea that it's racism is a reason why Black Americans or Black people as a whole, in terms of Black people in Western nations, are not doing as well as their white counterparts. The idea that it's because of racism just isn't supported by evidence, or I think by logic and deductive reasoning.
So what do you think would be the cause of it then? Why?
Yeah, so I would say the major cause of it is the fact that a lot of Black men and women grow up in households where they don't have a father. That includes me. So in the beginning of the article, I start off by being somewhat, I guess, biographical, where I explain, how I grew up without my dad and the consequences that come out of that, which means that my mom was married to my dad, and she has my son, my older brother. Then I am born. Well, before I'm born, I mean, when she's conceived me, my dad leaves. Well, then now she is in Ghana, Africa, where she's forced then to work two jobs. And then also when we come here, same issues too when we move to Canada, where she's working two jobs. And by working two jobs, now I don't have a father at home, and my mom is out of the home every morning, every afternoon, every night.
Yeah.
So now
she's not there in your life.
Exactly.
So you have two losses. You have a loss of a father and kind of, in a sense, a loss of a mother.
Yes. Now my mom is the best mom in the world. She's an incredible woman. I can't even begin to describe just how strong and how persevering she is. But the nature of working two jobs when you are a single mom is you're not going to be home to provide a stable environment for your children. And because of that, at a young age, I developed certain habits that became very destructive. I started engaging in sexual sin at 5 years old. And I became extremely violent as well because I didn't really, that's my sin, right? Those are my issues. Nevertheless, I didn't have the environment that would have made it easier for me to not struggle with those things. So because of that, I use that to say that is actually not, I didn't even know how abnormal I think my upbringing was until I would talk to certain people and I'd realize that whenever I would say certain things, they would be a bit surprised, like, what? You've had, so anyway, but as I mentioned in the article too, children who are raised in a single parent household are twice as likely as their counterparts to engage in early sexual activity. Well, that produces things like, naturally, them also having children out of wedlock as well, which then becomes a recurring issue amongst people. Now, this is important because 73% of Black people in America grow up in a household without their father or to unmarried mothers. But in America, white children or white people as a whole, only 29% of them, I think it's only 29%, grow up in an environment where they don't have their father at home or only two single mothers. So that's a gap of 44%. So that gap is going to show up in other socioeconomic issues, right? There's reasons why Black people are sadly more likely to be have behavioral problems or be more criminal. It's not because of nature, of course, it's not. But the reality is, if you grow up in an environment where you don't receive the kind of discipline and support that you need, you're going to suffer more challenges than the other person.
Now, I think this is very interesting. Let me just interrupt you, because I know somebody's going to ask, and they're going to say, okay, so your mom and dad are married. He leaves. Did he leave because he wanted to live his life? Did he just want to run and explore? Or are there issues in the relationship that forces him to leave?
Yeah, no, there weren't issues within the relationship. My mom was, just knowing how good of a mother she is, I know she'd be a good wife as well. And from what she's told me, when he learned that my mom was pregnant with me, he was disappointed because in Ghana, my parents were pretty poor already, and they were struggling. He was a businessman, and he was struggling to provide for the family. That was with already one child, my older brother. So then when I was conceived, I guess he felt overwhelmed and thinking that he couldn't really provide for us. And then that is the reason why he left. And then when he left, I suppose, from what I understand, he didn't come back because he found another woman or a new family, and I guess he was more comfortable in that environment than to come back home.
That's kind of interesting. So he's going to leave a family because he cannot provide for it, but then he's going to go into another family that he'll, in essence, have to provide for as well.
Yeah.
So could there be something more happening in the background?
I don't know. Honestly, I mentioned in the article, I've never met him. I've never seen him before. When he left, my mom has never, been able to reach him. So nobody knows. We know he's in Nigeria somewhere. He left Nigeria, but I don't even know whether he's alive or dead. I have no clue. So we don't really know a lot of. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So when I was reading your article, so it was a picture you were looking at. Was that it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned I was 17 when I saw that picture, and I'd never seen my dad before at the time, and I didn't really ask my mom a lot of questions about it because I knew for her to talk about it. So at 17, she had returned from Ghana at the time, and she had a picture of my dad, and she showed it to me. And it was a bit of a surreal experience where it was, and it was hard. I haven't seen that picture since then. In many ways, I don't want to see that picture.
Okay.
But yeah, so it was that picture where I see him, and he's around my age at the time, 17, and I'm looking at him, and I'm in shock that, wow, this is my dad. This is who, what do you look like at the time? So yeah, I've never met him or before, or seen him before. A picture.
Okay. So your mom had to end up doing this all by herself.
Yeah.
And so you're from the belief that if your father was in the home, these issues that you dealt with later on, sexual issues of violence, would have been minimized in some sense.
I definitely dislike, I'll be honest with you, I always cringe when people blame their issues in their life on other people, whether it's their parents or not. I don't think, when I meet God one day, he's going to hold me responsible for my sins.
Yes, definitely.
And I know we agree on that.
Yeah.
Still, I do think that just because of what the Bible says, right, about the nature of a family and the role of the father, and then the role of the mom, but because my dad refused to accept his role, my mom then was forced to move out of her role, which is to be home and to be taking care of me. Now she was taking care of me financially and providing, but then because of that, there was nobody else in the home. So I'll be 5-6 years old, and I would be home by myself, and I would put myself to bed, and I'd wake up next morning by myself. So I just didn't have the kind of discipline that would have been there if she was in the home. So anyway, so if my dad was in the home, I'd be more likely to not struggle with those challenges. But I can't say definitely that I wouldn't have those challenges, right? Because there are other people who grow up with both their dads and mothers who have, similar issues that I did. So I can't say for sure. I just know that that's sadly a very common challenges that a lot of parents, a lot of people who grow up with other dads go through.
It's interesting because I was formerly a youth pastor many, many years ago, and I dealt with this direct issue. In fact, I could even tell you how gangs start. With a majority of the kids that I dealt with, there is no father in the household, none at all. And then if there's no father in the household, the mom has to work a couple jobs to keep the bills paid, or the mother is busy trying to find another relationship to get into. Or in fact, with the area that I dealt with with these youth, the parents were on drugs themselves. So then what I noticed is because you have these overly dysfunctional households, and there's no parents really governing these kids, what ends up happening is that these kids find community with kids like them, like themselves in their situation. And this is how a gang mentality begins to form, because now it's like almost a second family. Right? But I see it on the flip end, brother. I see where there are men that want to be in the life of their kids. Because the relationship doesn't work out, then there's this pulling away of the children from the men. They're pulled away purposely, and they have the stigma of, you're a deadbeat. But in a sense, they're forced to be a deadbeat. Right? So I don't know how you would balance that out with the article that you wrote.
I think from what I've read, most of the time, absentee fathers are absent in their children's lives because of their own choices. But of course, there are times where, unfortunately, there are also, just because there are bad men in this world, and there are also bad women in this world, right? So sometimes I know of certain people who want to see their children, but their ex-wives refuse for them to have that privilege. So there are cases where that definitely does happen. The reason why, and I thought about whether I should add that caveat to the article as well too. I ultimately chose not to do so because I wanted the article to be completely tied to my experiences.
Okay. Yeah.
So because
And
my
that's fair.
experiences, yeah, and because my experiences and most children who grow up with absentee fathers have that, it's usually because of their dad's own choices. I thought it was best to kind of leave that out, but that's an important thing to mention, though, that yeah, it's not always, absentee fathers or people who grow up with other dads in the home. It's not always because the dad's fault. Sometimes there are other issues that produce that kind of environment.
Yeah. I always wonder with the politically correct climate that we are living in. And for years, men have been told that they're not necessary. You see from the feminist movement, what will they say? You don't need a man. We are equivalent. You'll even see a lot of even black fathers that will tell their black child, their daughter, you don't need a man. You're better. You're more superior. And so they get into relationships, and what ends up into that relationship? They take that same attitude towards their fiance or their husband and their boyfriend, and from that kind of attitude or thinking,
that's true.
They leave.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't need a man. Okay, well, obviously you don't need me.
That's true. And let's face it too, that a lot of Black women, or just women in general, who grow up with single mothers, they're also going to live in an environment where they've learned that that's normal, that's the norm. So then that may produce a heart that will say, well, then if I also develop perhaps certain characteristics and a character that wouldn't appeal to a good and godly man, and then if I have children out of wedlock, then that's okay. That's fine. And sometimes, again, men, Black men, any kind of man who isn't faithful, to his wife is responsible. But sometimes too, obviously, any woman as well too who doesn't invite a faithful man into their lives is also at fault as well. And of course, it creates a cycle that just keeps making things worse and worse. So one of the things I didn't mention in the article, I don't think I have mentioned it, is shortly after slavery, especially in America, there were more Black men in the home than white men in the home.
Yes.
And to me, that's a very powerful thing. And I wonder, maybe I'll write about that at some point, maybe.
That would be a good topic.
Yeah, because these Black men, for the first time after slavery, where they were married to women, but they didn't really have a right to them, if that makes sense, right? Like they were owned by a white man, their master, and their children wasn't really their own either. So now, after slavery is abolished, they can now claim that not only is this house mine, not only do I have my own job, not only do I have my own land, I have my woman, I have my wife, and I have my kids, and nobody has the right to take them from me. So Black men were very, very faithful to their family.
Yes.
However, that changed shortly after the government, mostly under FDR, Roosevelt in the States, started saying, basically with his New Deal, that, well, the government can really be your daddy, right? And when that, or the government can be your husband, right? When that happens, well, then it creates an environment and a culture where it says that men are no longer necessary. So then the welfare state begins, and again, it creates a culture where men are no longer important. So look, in my life, I know many, many, many families, Black families, who are married, but they've lied to the government, saying that they're not really married, because then they get welfare and they get government support. Now the man is really still still around, but because they want more money, sadly, the man can't really live in a home. He's still technically linked to the woman, and technically, I suppose, married. But the woman has claimed that there's a break in the marriage or things like that. So again, it's all really so they can get more money from the government. But then that's only hurting the children, because the children don't have the man in the home. Yeah. And we've created an environment where many women are going to feel, not all of course, but many women are going to feel that it's better for me to collect money from the government than for my husband to be home to provide for me. And again, so that's why now every year it's getting worse and worse, where there are less Black men in their children's homes. Right. And that's because the government continues to expand and says, again, we're going to give women or single mothers more and more money. Now, again, my mom is a single mother, and she was helped by the welfare system for a time. But she once said to me that, Sam, the government once told me that, look, we'll give you the welfare system, we'll give you the money, from welfare, for as long as you need. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, I'm thankful, but I can work. I can make money for myself, and I don't want for you to support me. I want to support myself and my family. So she actually went to the government and the people that be and saying that, look, it's okay. I think I have a job now. I can handle it. Life may be hard, but I don't want the welfare money. Mm-hmm. And she stopped, and because of that, she was able to be freed and to be her own individual, and she was able to work hard, and eventually she bought her own home. But many of
very great.
Yeah, but many of her counterparts who were single mothers, sorry, I'm talking too fast. Many of her counterparts who were single moms at the time mm-hmm. didn't have that same attitude, and they're unfortunately still in the projects where we grew up, right?
Yeah.
So I think.
Yeah, because you know what I was thinking when you're saying that, welfare is a destructive cycle. It's a cycle that is meant to keep you on it.
Yeah.
So what you will see with a person, they will be able to live in subsidized housing, maybe be able to get subsidized daycare, definitely. And, the money is good enough for them for the months.
Yeah.
But when they get off welfare, all of a sudden the rent goes up. Now they're paying regular daycare. Mm-hmm. And they see that, listen, this is not beneficial to us.
Yeah.
It's actually worse.
Yeah.
So they end up going back on the welfare system.
Exactly.
Whereas, regardless, if you break out of it,
yeah,
you, like your mom, you'd probably end up doing better eventually. You'll go through the initial struggles, but eventually it'd work out in your favor.
Exactly. If you're getting free money, what's the point of working hard to get yourself wherever you are?
Definitely.
And again, now the welfare system is initially designed to help people.
Definitely.
Problem is, sometimes by helping people, you end up actually hurting them.
Yeah.
Because we don't bring about accountability and actual support to say, okay, let's not only help you with money, let's help you get a job. Let's help you. I know they try that, but it could be done in a much, much better way.
Yeah. So they enable bad behavior.
Exactly.
They force cripple you.
Exactly.
Because you could see the benefit of it, but breaking off it now, the difficulties just make it a little bit more harder for you to accept that, listen, this is going to be my new life or my new way of productivity.
Exactly. See, one of the things that people don't realize is this: in the States, the wealth gap, between Black Americans and white Americans is actually worse today than it was 50 years ago.
Okay.
Now.
And why do you say that? Why?
Well, in terms of if you look at the amount of money that so for example, I think I mentioned in the article that Black men earn both in Canada and America. Black men earn 30% less than their white counterparts. It was the disparity wasn't as bad 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now that's important because since 50 years ago, America and Canada have poured billions and billions and billions of dollars to help Black people. To help them become, to have a better socioeconomic status. Mm-hmm. If that was being done the right way, why is it worse now than it was before?
Yeah.
So sometimes the answer that we think is just throw more money to people. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
I agree. I agree. It doesn't work like that. So if you were to summarize your article to create a lesson to somebody, what do you want them to learn from this? Because before you go there, because if when people read it, some are going to be angry, right? Yeah, they're going to think that it's slanted. But you clarified that you're talking about your experience.
Yeah.
From what you see.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some facts in the article that, I mean, you can't debate facts, right?
Yeah.
And
facts don't care about your feelings, brother. It is as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's some facts there. And so the main point of my article is to explain that, look, evangelicals and anybody who wants to help out Black people, and there are many people who want to help out, right? Mm-hmm. That's good. But if you're going to help out, look at the actual issue. Because look, it's very easy to say that the disparities that exist between Black people and white people are there because of racism. That's easy. You can just say that and you can virtue signal and you'll get all the applause and everything. That's
definitely.
Good. You will join most people who just say the same thing.
Yeah.
Easy. It's a lot harder to say the government can look at improving certain things, but hey, Black men, step up, right? Now that won't give you the applause. That won't get you the applause at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, but at least you'd be biblical, right? The Bible's very clear that men are important. A righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children. That's not happening amongst many people, and in this case, as in we're talking about this, this issue, Black men have failed to do that. So the point of my article is to say, let's look at the crux of the issue, right? The disparities exist. We all acknowledge that. Yes, there are disparities that exist between Black people and white people. That's true. The issue is why. And if we're making the argument it's because of systemic racism, well, it doesn't really. You can't. It's the facts and the historical truths do not align with that assertion. It doesn't, right? Why is it that Canada, America, Britain, who have different histories, who did not have anywhere near the kind of systemic racism, at least as recently as Jim Crow, for example, 50 years ago, why is it that they have the exact same issues that Black people are having to, in terms of just the disparities? Why do they have those same issues, right? The issue is, and again, the common denominator in all that is that the Black men aren't in the home. And that's been happening well before. Some people will claim it's because of the drug war. This issue has been trending well before the drug war happened.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I would say is the point of my article.
So, and if you want to come from a biblical standpoint, you're talking men being the head of the home, loving their wives, women also being submissive to their husband, as the scripture says, as unto the Lord. So as he is following God, allow him to do so and be supportive in that. And if you feel he's going the wrong direction, as a wife, you are to be prayerful that your husband continue to make the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a tough topic because a lot of people are they're not gonna like that part either. The whole feminist movement and submission, that's not gonna go together. So at the end, we're all depraved people, and we're all people in need of a savior.
Yeah.
We're always going to see these imbalances and these struggles in the home, especially where Christ is not in them.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, my mom is a believer, and that's why she was faithful. My dad isn't a believer, and that's why he wasn't faithful.
Yeah.
Right? It comes down to that ultimately, is that if we're going to be faithful to our spouses, or faithful to our children, it's going to ultimately come from us being faithful to Christ. So if we're not being faithful to Christ, then there's going to be a lot of chaos in our households, in our communities, and really in our countries.
I agree, my brother. Like I said before, facts don't care about your feelings. And oftentimes when you read articles like this, we have to come to the conclusion that simply the truth sometimes hurts. It's good to have you on, brother.
Yeah. Thank you for having me again. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, great. You take care.
You too.